The first, in the beginning, I will read two different hypothetical questions that have been posed, sent to us earlier by members of the group, and would like to throw it out for answers from you. If you have answers, clap your hands. If you have really great answers, on the table. But we expect some answers coming out. And then after, what we're going to do is not just pose it and say, raise your hands. We're going to ask the tables to get together and discuss the question. We'll give you a couple of minutes and then ask you to report back with some answers. And they better be good ones. So if you are at a really small table and you want to congregate when it's time to confer, please feel free of time. Asks this: how would you respond to a judge who shares with you as the chief that he has, or she has, materially changed the way she works since the court started using dispositions without opinions? He or she tells you that with cases coming fast and furious, I place even more reliance on the other judges. Most of the time, I am not studying the briefs when the other judge has to make the decision the way I used to. I find myself voting for decisions without opinion that I probably would not have voted for in the old days. It used to be that once I really dug into the briefs, I would find myself sometimes voting against the decision. I'm not working any less. It's just a different way. I must admit that I'm not totally comfortable with it at times. In other words, as I understand this hypothetical, this judge is saying, I'm putting my efforts into the decisions that where I have to write a full opinion and really taking a lot of questionable shortcuts, or shortcuts that judge feels is questionable in voting on the ones where there's not going to be an opinion, and just kind of going along and saying whatever my colleague, who's the assigned judge for the panel, says, I'll just go along with, and then I won't have to worry about that case. I ask you to take, Ed, how many minutes are we going to allow for this? 2? 4? 2? 5? Okay, we'll give you
2 and 12. 6.
Yeah, 6. Okay, no. Okay, take a few minutes and confer and come up with an answer to what you would say to that judge, or how you would deal with that issue on your court.
You want to know? This is
Okay, time's up. Let's hear some table banging with really good answers here. Who has a great answer? Which table? What do you do about the judge that's taking shortcuts?
This at least on our court, this has worked. It depends on your. I suppose if you've got some folks that really don't care. But on our court, we have different judges with different idiosyncrasies, but I do believe strongly that all of our judges have the best interests of the court and their colleagues at heart, and what they don't realize is the discrepancy between their behaviors or lack of behaviors and how it is impacting the others. So I was thinking in this situation, if you sat down with that judge and you say, realize that you're trying to get your work done and you're doing this for expediency for your sake, but I know you've got the best interests of the court at heart, or your colleagues, and are you aware that it's having X impact on your colleagues who are on the panel with you, or if you're not prepared, or whatever that is, and go at it that way, and how it's negatively impacting others. Now, if you have a colleague who is not of goodwill, this won't get anywhere, but I have found for most of the time when I've had these types of conversations, by underscoring the person's good intention and good objectives and explaining what they're doing, whether someone's late with a draft or whatever it happens to be, or lack of preparation, how it impacts the other colleagues, that has worked a lot in the past, and I've even had people thank me for taking the time to talk to them because they were totally unaware. But maybe I live in a Pollyanna world.
Yeah. Ann?
Well, our table said the first thing that we wouldn't do is say, oh my God, put people on the defensive. Instead, we would make the assumption that if the judge is coming to the chief, that means that the person wants help. They're asking for assistance, and how do I get back on track? So we would make that assumption, sit down with the judge, and first say, well, what brought about this change? It wasn't quite clear from the hypothetical of what changed this judge's manner of work. So we'd want to get to the bottom of that, and then we'd want to assume again that this person's asking for, well, how can I get up to par and do my job? It's a given that that's an inappropriate way to work, and that judge has acknowledged that by coming to the chief. So we would go through, well, what is your manner of working? And we talked about an example. Would be we have a judge on our court who is I think the perfectionist that Dr. Day spoke of, and doesn't want to let go. Works hard as can be, but you need to sit down and say, well, there are certain things, like you'd have a staff draft, and everybody agrees it's the right way to go. You don't have to redo everything to make it perfect. You can make it so it's adequate, it's getting out, and have some speed to it. So you can give examples to the judge. And finally, of course, ask anything that they might need, any assistance, and then follow up later on. Keep an eye on the situation, and then make a point of going back to the judge saying, well, have things improved, have things worked, and have that discussion again if need be. So that's what we do.
As I read the hypothetical, I thought that this judge was saying, I want to put my time into the hard cases, so I'm just going to completely ignore the little ones, where that's just result-oriented, where there's never going to be an opinion written because it's a small case. And as I read it, I thought perhaps that judge was coming to the chief to say, is this okay? Do you approve of this? And was looking for somebody to say, yes, that's okay, because that's what they really want to do. Do you say, your style is your own style, you have to be comfortable with your own conscience? Or do you say, no, that's really not right? How much do you interfere in the way another judge handles his caseload? I mean, assuming that he gets his votes out and he gets his work done. Phil, you had an answer.
Well, I don't have an answer, but I want to just make a comment. And I'm not sure we had a consensus on this, but this is what we discussed at my table, mostly because I really picked up on the context of your problem, which was these unsigned per curiam decisions. And it really brought back to mind when my court used to use those. And I say used to use unsigned per curiams because we found that I'm not sure we had the extent of the problem, Judge, that you've described, but we found that just that practice encouraged that kind of a mindset. When nobody had to sign it, we were just, and we did these with staff decisions, the easy, repetitive ones that we just assigned to our staff. They gin them up pretty quickly. They're very good at it. We would run through the briefs and generally just sign off. But we found that it encouraged, I'm not too worried about that one, and some sloppiness started creeping into those things. And when I was chief, I held a meeting about this and proposed that we do away with unsigned per curiams, and we did. That was a long time ago now, and we all agree in my court that that was one of the best things we did, because we eliminated that, and when a judge has to sign it, you're forced to pay more attention to it. We rely on each other, and in my court, we don't really have the extreme problems that have been described here. So we have some confidence in each other, and I know that judge has looked carefully at the case and probably looked at the record too. I won't look at the record in all of the really routine, repetitive, and generally criminal matters that, they tend to fall into very similar categories time after time. But the per curiam practice was not a good one for my court.
On our court, we use per curiams only if we see a security issue.
Yeah, and that's the one time we will do it too.
But now, are you talking about unsigned opinions of a brief nature, or are you talking about?
No,
I
I've
had
got
the
unsigned
idea that,
opinions.
that
We call them memos.
in the hypothetical, this was just an order in lieu of an opinion.
Oh, just an order.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we don't do too much of that.
Yeah, we don't either. Our Supreme Court, in exercising its certiorari type discretionary review, wants an opinion from us. So we do them in all cases. But sometimes, hopefully, if we can convince the law clerks to do it, they're brief. But rarely can you convince a law clerk to be brief, I find.
Bonnie, I think one of the subtexts that this scenario presents is, again, a problem to responses to budget cuts. The need to go quicker with fewer resources puts pressure on the delivery of justice. And so we need to be thinking about the use of these sorts of devices as case management tools and the corrosive effect it can have on the quality of justice.
Right. John?
I think I just wanted to follow up with what Dave said there. That is so true. We were talking here, and on our court, 40 years ago, each one of the three judges averaged 23 dispositions a year. Today, each of the three judges on our court averages 150 dispositions per year. So over a 40-year period, almost a five-fold increase. And so that puts a lot of pressure on us, as Phil was talking about, to have confidence in our colleagues to get it right, and we don't spend as much time as they're going to spend as the authoring judge on it.
Because you can't.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just,
Right.
It's just the time pressures.
It has to be a judgment call, ultimately. Any more answers to this one? Or okay, let's move on to
Can I
the...
just make a
Yeah,
comment?
sure, sorry.
Unless somebody hasn't answered yet. Now, we're different. Everybody seems to be different. In our court, 85% of our cases, 85% or more, are per curiam unpublished opinions. Unless old, only published opinions as precedent are signed. So what we're talking about in this hypothetical is what Bonnie just mentioned. It's what we call a sua sponte summary disposition with a paragraph or so. And no, in this situation, I have pressed for these summary dispositions because they're essentially add-ons to the calendar, and it's the only way we can avoid a backlog or shortfall each year. We have to do it so that we can concentrate on the opinions that take some time. But in response to this hypothetical, no one would say to the judge, well, if you're not willing to go along with a summary disposition, we can put it back on the plenary calendar. I think you have to understand my reasons for promoting summary dispositions. But if you're uncomfortable about it, you have to do the vote. You have to do the work. You're an equal decision maker whether you sign it or not. And if you're unwilling to do that, put it back on the plenary calendar. I want to convince you why I think this system is right. But no one would be sympathetic to somebody who says, I really don't want to do it this way, because that's what the person is saying.
Yeah. Well, and ultimately, each judge has to look himself in the mirror every morning. And okay, second hypothetical.